Welcome back to the Let's Get Personal podcast. I'm your host, Chris DeBella. Today we have the great pleasure of chatting with Deb Stoodley, current chair of the Massachusetts Motorcycle Association. Her group advocates for riders all over the Commonwealth by putting forward legislation and defending riders' rights anywhere they're threatened. Now, let's get personal with Deb.
All right. Well, I'm excited this morning, to be joined by Deb Stoodley. She is the newest board chair of the Mass Motorcycle Association. And I think we have a lot of ground to cover, a lot of exciting topics. I'm so happy you're joining us today.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here.
And I was reading your bio, and really interesting how you got started. And I love the story about how you started on your front lawn. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh my gosh, it was a nightmare. So I took my course. I passed my course, automatically got my license because I passed my course. Was all excited, went out, bought my new motorcycle. So I show up at the dealership first of all, and I'm all by myself. And the salesman who I knew from my husband buying his motorcycle says, "Where's Dan?" I'm like, "I don't want Dan here. I'm picking my own bike. I don't want his influence." So he's trying to show me all these big, beautiful new bikes, and I'm like, no, something little, something cheap. I'm going to probably bang it up a little, and, I want something easy to handle. So I end up buying the cheapest used motorcycle they had there, but it was beautiful.
What'd you get?
A custom Sportster 1200.
Oh, I've heard that referenced as the gateway drug.
Yeah.
So it gets you hooked.
So it does. Yeah. She will always be my firstborn.
Yep.
So I brought her, so I bought her. She wasn't ready to go home yet. So I just go home and I, show the pictures. This is what I bought, And he's like, "That's good, but you'll probably outgrow it really soon." And I said, "No, I don't think so. It's big, it's heavy. I probably should have gone with a 250. And went on my way. They finally had a title mix up with the bike. So when they thought it was ready, they're like, "Come and get it. You can ride it home." And I'm like, "I can't ride it home. I can't go on the highway." "Well, it's your bike. You have to ride it home." And I said, "No, you should deliver it." Well, that's when the title mix-up came in my favor. So they got that straightened out, but because it was such a long time, they ended up delivering the bike to me at work, which was
Oh, wow.
a lot closer to my home than the dealership. So, I was still nervous. I'd never really ridden on the street other than my class, which was around a parking lot. So I jump on the bike to go home, and I've got my husband following me in the truck just in case. But I'm feeling pretty confident. I passed my class. I've got my license. I know I can ride. So I jump on the bike, do pretty good getting out of the parking lot, get it up the street, come to my first intersection, and slam it right over. So now I'm upset, but I'm not going to give up. I get back on it. I go home, and I get home safely, and I'm good. So the next ride out is with my husband on his bike and me on mine, and I'm following him, and he's looking in the rear view. He's like, "I'm going to kill myself watching you behind me because I'm not watching where I'm going because I'm so nervous." So I do okay behind him. I'm putting along, and everything was good. And we pull over at a store. So he's, can check on me. "How you doing?" I'm like, I'm good. So we get back on the bikes and we go to leave, and I whiskey throttle right out of the parking lot, across the street, up on a curb on somebody's front lawn, and I'm down. And he's like, "What happened?" I don't know. So I had a bunch of those little incidences, and he finally said, "You're grounded. You're not leaving the house on your bike. I'm setting up an obstacle course. We have 5.5 acres of
Wow.
wooded land." He said, "Here's an obstacle course. You ride your bike around this yard until you master it. You are not riding on the road." So I hated him. I was really mad, but I did it. I got on the bike a few times, and every day he'd go to work. This was during COVID. So, I was home a lot. He was still going to work. So he'd come home from work, and my bike would be laying on its side on the front yard. And I'd be sitting on the stairs crying, and it was a lot. But finally I got really good. And if you can ride a 1200 Harley on a muddy, grassy, wet yard around cones that are set up, then you can ride it anywhere on the road. So I got good. So he was right to do it. I respect him for it.
How long did you do that for?
It felt like years, but I think it was weeks, But I think by the end of the year, I was good.
I love the story, and I think it's such a great way to start because it's to think about, and this, you were a late bloomer, so to speak. You didn't start riding until much later in life.
I think I was 50.
And so this is in, I think from what I read, 2017.
Yeah.
So, to go from that to, the new board chair, there's a great journey.
Yeah.
And I think it does a lot to break down some barriers for people that are thinking, later in life if they want to ride or are worried or concerned about riding, or are they going to be able to do it and they're overwhelmed, or I think it's a really great message to send people that A, you can start anytime, and B, it's okay if you're not totally comfortable your first time out. Right. And that, fortunately for you, you had 5 acres and a husband that was a rider.
Yeah.
But that I love that story. And I'm so happy you shared that.
Yeah, it was not the high point of my life, but I'm really glad I went through it because I think I did a lot of learning.
Right.
Not just about riding, about myself, about my abilities, learning to ride as an adult really brings out your confidence level. I was always timid and afraid. I grew up riding on the back of the bike. My dad had a Vespa. I rode on that. My brother had a bike for a little while. Then I got to high school and all my boyfriends had motorcycles, so I was always on the back. My first husband rode, so I was on the back. My second husband now, I was on the back. And finally I'm like, I want to control when I'm on, I get nervous on the back, but I think I'd be okay if I was in control. And that's when I decided I really wanted to do it. I didn't know it would become an addiction, but it really did become an addiction. And yeah, that's why I started reaching out, trying to find females to ride with, because I didn't feel comfortable, when my husband was busy and not riding with me. I didn't feel comfortable reaching out to his guy friends, hey, let's go for a ride. So I was reaching out for women,
Right.
Joined up with the Litas. I met a lot of really fantastic, strong women there. Friends of ours for years had been bugging us about joining the MMA. And, I was like, why would we spend money to belong to an association we know nothing about? They don't ride, they're not a club, and not that we want to be part of a club, but why would we do it? Finally, they kind of got through to us, and we said, all right, we'll bite, we'll join. So we joined.
You're talking about the MMA
The
now.
MMA, yeah.
And what was the thing that really clicked for you to make that decision?
I don't know. I guess it was just peer pressure, really. There was no one thing that stuck out in my mind. I guess for me personally, it was more, there are women in this, and I'm going to meet other women, other like-minded women, my age, that maybe I can hang out with and ride with.
Right.
So I guess that was probably it for me.
Because so much of biking is the community, it's the camaraderie, it's the ability to go out with people
Yes.
and share in that experience.
Yes.
And you found counterparts through the MMA?
I did. They became my family. I spent a lot of time with them. We have our annual fall roundup event every September, and I met a lot of people through that, and they're great people. But when I started going to the meetings for the MMA and hearing what they were really about, I got to see truly that they're fighting for, not just for me, not just for the clubs, but they're fighting for every rider. I mean, there's 250,000 rather, registered riders in Massachusetts, and we're fighting for their rights, all of them.
So I think you bring up a good point, because you did touch on it a little bit about kind of what you were looking for, what the MMA, what you thought it was. Can you tell us, especially for people out there that might be wondering the same thing, they might be you when you were first thinking about it, what did you think the MMA was versus what did you learn it was
Right.
And what are you happy about now that you did get into it?
Right. So I thought it was just a bunch of grumpy old biker men, that just rode together, basically. And then the more I found out what they do, the legislative aspect of it, where they're going to the State House and they're filing bills that are fighting for things for our protection, lane sharing, for instance, controversial subject. But when I saw it in action, funny story, not really funny, we had a raffle bike that we raffled off one year. And the man who won the bike ended up getting hit from behind, and he was sandwiched between two vehicles. Wow. He wasn't seriously hurt, but he was hurt. And the bike was definitely hurt. And it was because he was stopped in traffic directly behind another vehicle, and the other one hit him from behind and pushed him right into the one in front of him. Probably if he had been lane sharing, we like to call it, he would have had a better chance of escaping that. Motorcycles aren't seen. They just aren't.
Well, I think you bring up a point that is controversial at the beginning, and I haven't done a deep dive lately, but my understanding initially was only California that might allowed it at one point, might have expanded from then. But I don't think people hear that side of the conversation because they just think about, bikes that they might not see, driving in between two cars. But there's a lot of reasons why that's important as a motorcycle rider, one of which you've just touched on. Yeah. Other is just the exhaustion of the bike. And, but tell us a little bit more about why is that so important? So
when there's a motorcycle that's driving in a straight line, directly in front of a car or directly behind a car, very often they're either in a blind spot or they're just not, because they're so small, because they just blend in, they're not seen. If that motorcycle does the swirlies or whatever, they have a better chance at getting seen. As far as the lane sharing goes, yeah, if you're driving 70 miles an hour on a highway and they come flying up between two lanes, that's not really what we're going for. That is dangerous. But if you're in traffic and most of the vehicles are either at a dead stop or crawling along, you're going to be seen a lot better if you're between the lanes. And even if you're not seen between the lanes, there's not going to be another car there that's going to rear end you.
Right.
You have to use your head and be sensible. I don't know. I was against it at first, and I've been swayed. I've seen it go both ways. I've seen both sides of the story, but I've seen it save lives.
I almost feel it's maybe more relevant today than it might have been because I feel like there's so many more distracted drivers on the road, on their phone, not paying attention. So things like you talked about getting sandwiched might be more prevalent now than it was when people didn't have those distractions.
That's true. There's also more cars on the road.
Right.
There's more traffic. Everything is just busier.
What else are you guys into legislatively this year?
So we have 8 bills that we've filed this year. That's one of our most important ones to us. Others we have, I have to refer to my notes.
Yeah, go right ahead. I believe you had mentioned a helmet law repeal. Is that one that's on the docket?
I think that's just one that it has just been there for 100 years. There's a $2 one, I call it. When you register your motorcycle, part of that registration fee goes to a motorcycle safety fund that's managed by the state of Massachusetts. We've never seen any of those funds anywhere. We don't know what they do with those funds, whether they use them, whether they're just sitting there collecting interest, we don't know. One of the bills that we filed is trying to get them to put that back into the motorcycle community. via either a refund to those people who take the class and pass their class, or whatever, as long as they put it to use in the riding community, rather than just sit on it.
That's a nice initiative.
Yeah, so that's one. There's a lot about motorcycle parking, not so much where I live, but in the city, there's places where they don't allow motorcycles to park, and why not?
What about Cecilia's Law? Is that something you're familiar with?
Yes.
It's a right-of-way violation bill that there's aiming to increase penalties for drivers who are causing accidents by turning in front of other vehicles.
Okay, so yeah, so that they're fined more heavily
Right,
if they're found at fault.
right, because I think that is something that riders probably experience. A lot of people, just because, as you're saying, they don't see them as often. They're getting cut off, and that's something that may make people stand up and pay more attention.
So statistically, I believe there were somewhere around, don't quote me on this, 117 motorcycle deaths in Massachusetts last year.
Wow.
Most of them, sadly and regrettably, most of them were single vehicle accidents. So sometimes we're our own worst enemy. However, the bulk of the accidents where there was another vehicle involved, it was a car turning left at an intersection and cutting the motorcycle off. So just interesting. But yeah, those drivers should be found at fault, and they should be. We pay extra when we get tickets, whether we're in a car or on a motorcycle. We pay extra for a helmet fund. So we're paying for our own protection that way. But why aren't the drivers who are causing these accidents being more responsible? Why aren't they getting penalized more for what they're causing?
Right. So, tell me about why a new member. So it sounds like you're doing a lot legislatively. Mm-hmm. So a lot of things they may care about, you're really taking head on, which I don't really know of anybody else in Massachusetts that might be spearheading that. So really, if they want a voice, it sounds like at the State House, it's important to contribute and become a member of the MMA.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and it's not just legislation. So we've gone to court. We've helped fight tickets for loud pipes. We came up with the no test, no ticket. Yes, loud pipes can be a nuisance in a neighborhood, and we have a slogan, when in town, power down, be respectful. But sometimes the loud pipes are used just to antagonize the rider, and we try to stop that. The other thing is when back a few years ago, or maybe several years ago now, they were pulling people over for helmet violations, not just not wearing a helmet, but wearing the wrong helmet. And they would tow the person's bike. So we went and successfully fought that, so that now if they pull you over on your bike and they're going to tow it, there has to be some other safety violation on that bike. They can't just tow it for a civil infraction like your helmet is wrong.
So that was a recent success that you guys had?
And it wasn't really recent. That was several years ago,
Yeah.
but that is one thing that we fought for. Once a year, we have our annual meeting. It's in person. Most of our meetings are via Zoom. But once a year, we have an open meeting where we invite anybody to. And part of that meeting is our legislative agenda meeting, where people are welcome to speak up and give us ideas on things that they want us to work towards. So what we file is really a collective, it's a collection of requests really from other riders saying, I think this is a problem and we need to fix it, or this is something we can recommend, and we all discuss it and talk it over, and eventually somebody magically comes up with the legal language and puts it together, and submits it, and it becomes a bill. So
So that was one of my questions, and I think you kind of answered it, but you had mentioned there's around 250,000 registered riders in Mass. And obviously it's a very diverse group, right? Men, women, all different types of bikes, socioeconomic classes, all different reasons for riding. And, how do you collectively support and advocate for a group as diverse as all of those riders? And it sounds like you're drawing directly from them and what's important to all of them.
right. I mean, we don't exclude anybody because of the type of bike they ride. So back when I was learning to ride, that was one of the ways I was practicing. I would go to my daughter's house and ride her dirt bike around. I'd go see her and say, hey, I'm having trouble turning my bike left from a stop. Let me borrow your dirt bike. And I would just go ride around her field and stop at this tree and turn left around the tree over and over and over. Dirt bikes are great. They are great. And they have to be registered. So they're included.
Did your daughter was she a rider before you were?
Yes.
And did she help spur you into riding or your
So
interest?
no, I really wanted to ride my own for a lot of years before I did it. But it came down to finance, really. I knew I needed to take the class, and I knew I'd have to buy a motorcycle, and I had 3 small kids. I was a single mom, so I had to save my pennies, put food on the table. Finally, when they grew up and moved out and she started riding and I saw her, I was like, yeah, now it's time. Now it's time to save for me and do something I want to do. So, yeah, that's how.
And so your daughter's also involved in a group in Worcester that you had mentioned earlier.
So, yeah, she was a founder of the Worcester Leaders. She has since stepped down from being a founder. She had a baby and is home most of the time with him. So the Leaders is an all-female moto collective. They are a very diverse collection of women who just love to ride. They love bikes, they love to ride, and they're very strong, empowered women supporting each other. They're not a club, there's no membership dues, there's an application to join, but that's really just so that they know something about you. And they organize rides together, and they just teach new riders, experienced riders alike. They support each other, they help each other. I joined when I was a new rider, and one of my first long rides was with them. And it was like one of the best experiences of my life. I rode from where I live in Royalston out to meet my daughter in Hubbardston. We rode and met a bunch more. There ended up being, I think, 16 of us, and we rode to Salem, Mass, and rode around there. It was right around Halloween, so we had a blast. And they knew I was a new rider, so they put me kind of in the middle so they could watch over me and kept giving me tips on counter steering and all of that. And nobody frowned on my inexperience. Nobody critiqued, they just were there for my support. It was great.
That's amazing. It's almost like a mentoring, for new riders. Because I think, it can be very intimidating for a new rider. And I think to have that group, as you did, is invaluable.
Yeah, so then we took it a step further, and I went out to Babes Ride Out with the Litas, which was an amazing experience.
Where's that based out of?
So that is in upstate New York.
Okay.
They actually have 3 Babes Ride Outs. One is in New York. They have East Coast, which is that. They have the West Coast, which is somewhere. I don't know if it's in California. And then they have Midwest or Central, obviously, somewhere in Central United States. But it's an all-women motorcycle rally where they have hands-on activities, where you learn to service your own bike, you learn things like pinstriping, changing tires, all of those things. But again, they have the bike rodeo, so you get to play the games on the bike, and it's just women, so you feel safe. No woman has to feel threatened by having men around. Incredible experience. And that was a long ride when I was still a new rider and I had to pack for it. It's camping, so you learn to load up your bike with everything, pack just the essentials, and you're gone for 3 or 4 days.
So I would guess you're not still on your initial bike at that point. You must have made a transition.
I was. No, I was on the Sportster.
You were
Yeah,
on the Sportster.
I bought one of those really high seat backs, and just strapped
some
it all on
saddlebags,
there.
or?
It was great. Yeah. Just like you see in the movies where the biker takes off with nothing but the shirt on his back, and he loads up everything with, straps on the back of the bike. That's what I looked like. And it was a different kind of riding, because then I had to get used to balancing all the weight of all of my stuff.
Right.
But definitely fun.
What is a bike rodeo? You said they have a bike rodeo like everybody else, and I don't know what that means.
Okay, bike games.
Yeah.
So everybody knows about the weenie bite, right? Where the double rider, the girl on the back, not always a girl, but bites the weenie that's hanging above. So there's that, but they didn't do that. But there's other games like that too. So the slow race, where you go as slow as you possibly can without leaving the lane, very difficult to do. That's one of the games. There's several others, but every bike rally has bike games. They call it the rodeo.
So that one you took the Sportster to, I do know that you made a new purchase.
I did.
Up to a touring bike, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, so I have a Road King.
And how was that transition? Because that's a very different bike.
Yeah. No, yes and no. I
Yeah.
mean, it's heavier.
Heavier, yeah.
It's heavier, but it rides the same.
Yeah.
Once I got some miles on and got used to riding the Sportster, basically I can jump on any bike now and be comfortable.
Right.
So, it's only too heavy. If I drop it, I don't let it happen.
But the confidence you gained, I think, on that Sportster, would you recommend starting on the Sportster or the Road King, like to somebody new?
So to somebody new, I recommend not even starting on the Sportster 1200. I think it was too heavy for me to start. I wish that I had gone with my own initiative. My own idea at the beginning was to just get a little beater 250 and ride that till I couldn't stand it anymore. And I didn't. I listened to others, and I went big, and I got the 1200, which wasn't as big as they were trying to talk me into, but I think it was too big for me to start with.
Right. Because confidence is such a big thing, right? And then once you get that, as you said, you can probably jump on any bike you want right now, but getting there, is the important
It's
thing.
baby steps. You have to get comfortable. You have to stick within your own skill level. When you're a beginner, you can't. Some people can. Some people just are born with this knack. They can jump on anything and they're a success. But for some of us, I think probably due to my age too, it was really hard to learn. I don't know how I stuck with it. I was really stubborn, I guess, because I can't tell you how many times I dropped that bike in my first year of riding. I just mistake after mistake after mistake. I got through it, fortunately without any serious injuries. A lot of people don't. A lot of people decide it's too much for them. But I think if you really pull yourself back and realize that you're an infant learning to walk, you're gonna tumble, at least tumble in a safe way. For me, it was my front lawn.
And yeah, I know we touched on it at the beginning, but I love that story, and I think it's just such a great story for anybody interested in riding. If you really want it, you can do it. I think you've provided great steps for how to approach it, but then also don't be so frustrated that you just leave it at the first sign of struggle. You will get it. And I think that's great to hear from someone like you that has traveled this course now to where you are today. How is it like having your whole family? So you have just your daughter and your husband ride?
Yes.
And do you guys ever go out on rides or?
Sometimes we do. So I've been, my daughter and I rode a lot with the Litas together, which was awesome. What a great experience to ride side by side with your kid.
Right.
Of course, my husband and I ride together most of the time. He's the secretary for the MMA, so we're always, riding out to events and doing those things.
So if somebody's out there listening to this today, what should they do? How do they get involved? What do you recommend?
So email me or look at our website. We have Massachusetts Motorcycle Association.org is our website. You can join right on there, or you can access all of our email addresses, and you can email us. Or check us out at any of the events. If you see that we're there, stop by our booth, say hello. We'll give you a look sign, a bright yellow look sign, and a bumper sticker, and whatever else we've got going on for swag that day.
Any events coming up this summer?
So we are going out to New York for the rendezvous. We are attacking every bike blessing we can right now because early season is when they have the Native American bike blessings happening. So we'll be at most of those. You can catch us just about at every swap meet you see, or a lot of the rides, the charity rides. We're not always set up with a booth, but we're there. Just call our name, basically, and we will come.
So you had mentioned you wear a few hats at the MMA. So you're the board chair. Mm-hmm. What else are you doing there, and what else can members expect to receive from the MMA?
So I'm also the newsletter editor. As a member, when you join, you do get some discounts from certain things. You get, we have gold members that are businesses. They will give you discounts at the business. The one that comes to mind right now is the French King out in Irving, Mass. You can get 10% off if you show your membership card. What else? Oh, we have a great party every year that's open to the public, the Fall Roundup. So that's coming up as well in September. We hope we see everybody there.
And in this newsletter, can they get updates about the ongoing legislative action that's going on?
We try our best, to keep everybody informed, either in the newsletter, on the website, on Facebook, everywhere we can. We also have a little handout that we give people when we set up a table at a booth, set up a table at an event somewhere. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I'm going to hit you with some fast action questions for you. See what you think. What is your favorite ride that you've ever had?
My favorite ride ever probably was the White Mountains. I actually got married out there on the bike.
That's a beautiful area.
Yeah, so.
When in your stage of riding did you do that ride?
I was still on the Sportster, but it was a few years in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it with a group or?
So my husband, me, and a couple of friends really just rode out together to the White Mountains and rode around. And there was a hiking trail that we had found when we first got together as a couple. There was a little heart-shaped rock in the middle of the hiking trail that we had found, and we decided we wanted to hike out to that rock and get married there. So we packed up with a bunch of our friends. Our friend got ordained to do this for us, rode up to the White Mountains, rented an Airbnb for a week, and hiked in the trail and got married there, rode off on our bikes. I had the white leather jacket that said something like forever and always on the back or something that I got to ride off.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You've gotten into a lot of them, but if you had to give one piece of advice for a new rider out there, what would you think is the most important thing for them to know?
Don't listen to what anybody tells you about what bike you should be on and how you should be riding it.
And maybe start with less than more. You err towards less than more. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I mean, ride what you're comfortable with.
Yeah. How hard is it for you to trade a bike or to go up a level? Is that something that you find you can do easily with with one of these shops, or do you have to sell them before you can buy? Is there a market out there where it's easy to trade up when you're ready?
I didn't have a problem. So I'm just still on my second bike. I got it in trade for a square body Chevy. So, that was easy for me. Thank you to my husband for that one. But yeah, it was, when you go to the dealership, they're going to try to sell you the expensive bike. They want to make their living. But you have to know what you want. So my suggestion is to ride every motorcycle you can, test drive every one of them, and see what you're comfortable with. But know that your first bike, even though you love it, is probably not your forever bike.
Right. I think that's a great piece of advice. What has surprised you the most about joining the MMA?
I guess the camaraderie. Like I said, I joined and they became family. And it wasn't just all grumpy old men. It was men, it was women, it was families. It wasn't all, like at the rallies, it wasn't all show me your tits,
Right.
It was people and conversation and companionship and brotherhood. Like, it's family.
Right. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
If you could change one thing about how motorcyclists are perceived, what would that be?
I guess I would say just because we're wearing black leather and we have some patches sewn on, we're not bad people. We're still human beings. Literally, we're doctors, we're lawyers, we're clergymen, we're recovered alcoholics, we're everything. Anything and everything, and don't stereotype us.
Right. I think that's a great point, because it is. I think riders are such a great cross section of society, and I think you being here and talking just really lets people know what's out there, and I think you're a great representative of this group. I think they're lucky to have you, and I'm going to leave you with your last question: is do you have any message for women that are considering riding and maybe they're hesitant?
Just do it. Just do it. Really, just don't let the fear overtake you. I still get scared my first trip out every season. You get over it.
So it's funny, right? We live in New England and we don't have the riding season that somebody down south would. Mm-hmm. Do you ever think about, moving down south or having trips down south where you can kind of ride in the wintertime and extend the season? Or are you just happy with the few months we get?
So I don't think about moving there because I really love New England roads. I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I snowmobile. But I love taking trips down south so I can ride in the winter.
Right.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't love to go to the beach in the winter? Who doesn't love to ride in the winter?
Right.
Yeah.
So, one of the questions that I think a lot of people, people in the riding group, strike that. One of the questions that a lot of people get that maybe are looking from the outside in is, what's the difference between like a riding group and a motorcycle club? Is that something that you're familiar with?
A little bit. So a riding group is just that. It's a group of people who get together and they ride. Great to be part of one or several of them, because then you always have someone to call, hey, I feel like riding, let's go.
Right.
You're not bound to it. You don't have to pay any dues. You know, it's just like friends who love to ride and they ride. A club, you know, as in any club, you've got, you know, you've got the Eagles Club, you've got the Lions Club. Those are all clubs. There are certain guidelines that you follow, which is great. Again, it's brotherhood, it's sisterhood. You join the club and you have your family and you ride with them, but they have more regulations. They often have patches to represent who they are, whereas a riding group wouldn't have those patches. You wouldn't be able to identify them as a separate group when they're out.
Right. So one's more just more leisurely, one's more of a commitment.
Yeah.
Sounds like, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, you know, you've got friends who ride, and then you've got clubs that you join that you ride with.
Right.
One is more structured, is all.
Okay. Coming into your, so when did you first get appointed board chair of the Mass Motorcycle Association?
So it was, let's see, it was in our board meeting 2 months ago.
So very new.
Very new.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So in the new role, you're very new in, jumping on podcast already, getting the word out, which is great. What do you see, what do you hope to accomplish in the next few years in this position?
I am hoping to drive membership. I want to find a way to let people know that we're here. We're here for them, and that they want to join us and help us support other riders and their rights. So looking for all the new riders I can get.
Right, that's great. Well, I think you did a great job today getting that word out, telling people what the Mass Motorcycle Association does, and that you're here for all riders. I think is a great message, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks.